Have you ever believed something for so long that it felt unquestionable, almost permanent, only for one quiet moment to gently but completely undo it? Not through anger or debate, not through facts or arguments, but through a feeling you were not prepared for. That was the question hanging in the air on an ordinary evening in America, inside a modest concert hall where people expected culture, not confrontation, where they came to listen, not to be changed. There has always been a quiet insult drifting through global conversations, rarely spoken directly, but deeply felt. That some cultures are emotional, but not deep. That some voices are expressive, but not powerful. That some nations can entertain the world, but not move it. And somewhere in that unspoken hierarchy, the Philippines often found itself underestimated. Warm people, yes. Talented singers, of course, but profound, transformational, capable of shaking a Western audience to tears. Many believed the answer was no. It was not just casual observers who thought this way. Even educated voices reinforced it. One respected American academic once remarked, almost politely, that Asian folk music lacked the universality needed to reach Western hearts. He did not say it with malice. He said it as if it were settled truth. And many nodded along, because it felt comfortable to believe that emotional depth belonged to a select few cultures the world had already crowned. That illusion of consensus remained unchallenged for years. Until one evening, when no one expected anything unusual to happen. The program listed a Filipino performer, introduced simply, without fanfare. No grand reputation preceded him. No viral fame. Just a man carrying a song that had lived with him since childhood. Backstage, he adjusted his microphone with steady hands, though his chest felt tight. He had sung on many stages, but America felt different. He wondered quietly whether the people waiting outside would truly listen, or whether they would simply hear a foreign sound and move on. When he stepped into the light, the audience offered polite applause, respectful, neutral, curious but guarded. And then the first notes of Anak filled the room. The language was unfamiliar to most. The words meant nothing on the surface. But something deeper stirred. The melody carried a weight that did not ask for permission. It spoke of a child and a parent, of distance and regret, of love that survives misunderstanding. The singer's voice did not perform the song. It lived inside it. Within seconds, the atmosphere changed. People leaned forward without realizing it. A woman in the third row felt her throat tighten. A man near the aisle blinked rapidly, confused by the sudden pressure behind his eyes. They did not know why this was happening. They only knew it was real. By the time the final note faded, the room was no longer the same. Silence followed, thick and reverent. Not because people were unsure what to do, but because something had been touched that words could not immediately follow. And in that silence, a belief quietly collapsed. The idea that Filipino music could not carry universal emotion no longer made sense. That night was not meant to prove anything. Yet it did. Without speeches, without defense, just a song, and a people whose soul had finally been heard. After the applause faded and people slowly returned to themselves, questions began to surface. Not just polite curiosity, but something heavier. Who was this man? Where did this song come from? And why did it feel so familiar to people who had never set foot in his country? To understand that night, you have to step back into the life he carried with him onto that stage. A life shaped by struggle long before it ever touched an American audience. He did not grow up believing his voice would travel far. Like many Filipinos, his early years were marked by uncertainty. His father worked away from home for long stretches, chasing contracts that kept food on the table but left empty chairs at family meals. His mother carried faith like armor, praying quietly when money ran thin, when storms took the roof, when the future felt fragile. Music entered his life not as a dream, but as refuge. When words failed inside the house, songs filled the space between people. As he grew older, reality pressed harder. Scholarships were uncertain. Opportunities were scarce. At one point, illness threatened his ability to sing at all, a condition left untreated for months because medical care was simply not affordable. He watched friends give up dreams one by one, choosing survival over calling. There were moments when he questioned whether talent mattered in a world that demanded practicality above all else. Like many before him, he looked outward. He tried to imagine a future elsewhere. He auditioned, applied, traveled when he could. In America, he encountered admiration mixed with distance. People praised his tone, his warmth, then gently suggested he adjust, simplify, westernize. In Japan, discipline impressed him, but the emotional distance felt heavy. In parts of Europe, appreciation came with polite ceilings he could sense but not break through. Each place offered something, but none offered belonging. Each rejection, each near miss, carved a quiet doubt deeper into his chest. There were nights when he considered stopping altogether, when singing felt like a luxury he could no longer afford. The world, it seemed, had space for his voice, but only in controlled portions, only when it fit someone else's expectation. And then, unexpectedly, his path bent inward rather than outward. An invitation arrived from a cultural foundation connected to a university in Philippines. Not a promise of fame, not a contract, just an opportunity to reconnect, to perform, to teach, to remember why he started. Returning home was not easy. It felt like stepping back into unanswered questions. But there, surrounded by familiar streets and unfamiliar encouragement, something softened. He met mentors who did not ask him to change his sound, choir directors who spoke of music as prayer, students who listened not with critique, but with trust. In small churches and modest halls, he sang without filters, without translation, and felt something he had not felt in years, acceptance without condition. Still, he did not imagine that this rediscovery would lead him back to an American stage. When the invitation came months later, it felt almost unreal. A simple request: share one Filipino song. When he arrived back in America for that performance, something inside him was different. Not louder, not more confident in the way people usually mean it, but steadier. As if the doubt that once filled every quiet moment had finally learned to sit still. He carried the Philippines with him now, not as a passport or a flag, but as an inner anchor. The change began long before he stepped onto that stage. It began in places the world rarely notices. In rehearsal rooms where Filipino students sang with eyes closed, not to impress, but to offer. In chapels where music was woven into prayer so naturally that no one separated faith from sound. In late afternoons in Manila, where traffic roared outside while inside a small hall, voices rose together in harmony, imperfect yet fearless. There, he had relearned something essential. That music was not meant to be measured first. It was meant to be felt. Back home, he stopped asking whether a song would be understood. He began asking only whether it was true. When he sang Anak again and again, he noticed how people responded. Not with technique, but with silence, with bowed heads, with tears they did not wipe away quickly. He realized then that this song carried something universal, not because it tried to, but because it came from a place of honesty the world recognizes instinctively. So when the American invitation came, he did not rewrite the song. He did not explain it. He did not translate it. He trusted it. On the night of the performance, as he stood under the lights. He remembered a nurse in a Philippine hospital who once squeezed his hand before a minor procedure and whispered a prayer as if it were the most natural thing in the world. He remembered a professor who told him, "Your voice is not small. It only learned to survive quietly." He remembered a church choir singing through a power outage, their voices stronger without microphones. Those memories settled his breath. As he sang, he noticed something he had never seen in Western halls before. The audience was not analyzing. They were receiving. People stopped shifting in their seats. No phones rose. No whispers traveled. The room felt held, as if everyone understood that something delicate was unfolding and did not want to disturb it. Halfway through the song, he saw it clearly. A woman pressing her fingers to her chest. A man wiping his eyes. Not ashamed, not hiding. They did not know the words, but they knew the feeling. The ache of distance, the regret of silence, the love that waits even when unacknowledged. In that moment, the Philippines was no longer distant. It was present, alive, speaking directly into American hearts without asking permission. Inside him, skepticism gave way to something else. Trust. He realized that what he once feared as limitation was, in fact, strength. That the very things the world overlooked in Filipino culture were the things capable of breaking through emotional walls built over decades. As the song ended, he did not rush the silence. He let it breathe. Because in that pause, what happened next was not loud. It was not dramatic in the way people expect climaxes to be. It was quieter, deeper, and far more powerful. As the applause finally rose and filled the hall, the singer stood still for a moment longer than necessary. He was not absorbing praise. He was absorbing the realization that something inside him had shifted permanently. In the days that followed, he did not rush back home. Invitations came quickly, interviews, requests to explain the song, to translate it, to analyze why it worked. He declined most of them. Instead, he spent time with people, ordinary conversations, shared meals, long pauses where no one felt the need to speak. Americans who had attended the concert approached him with eyes still soft, voices still careful, as if afraid that explaining too much might break what they had felt. One man told him he had not cried in 20 years. Another said the song reminded her of prayers her grandmother used to whisper at night. A young woman admitted she had never thought about the Philippines before that evening, and now she wanted to know everything. Not facts, feelings. The singer listened more than he spoke, because he understood something now. This was not about him anymore. What moved people was not technical brilliance. It was the soul behind it, a soul shaped by a culture that learns early how to endure without becoming bitter, by a people who pray in storms, laugh in uncertainty, and keep choosing kindness even when life gives them very little reason to. The audience had not fallen in love with a song. They had encountered Filipino values, carried gently through melody. As he reflected on his own journey, the transformation became clear. He had once treated his Filipino identity as something to balance carefully on international stages, something to soften, something to explain. Now, he understood it as his greatest strength. The faith that carried families through separation, the resilience that taught joy even in hardship, the hospitality that makes strangers feel seen. These were not small traits, they were rare ones. Late one evening, alone in his hotel room, he played the song again softly. This time he did not sing. He listened, and tears came, not from pain, but from gratitude, for his parents, for his homeland, for a people whose stories often go unheard, yet resonate so deeply when finally given space. The climax of this journey was not the standing ovation. It was the sentence he found himself repeating quietly. almost in disbelief. "I have never seen this anywhere else. Not because other cultures lack beauty, but because what he carried was uniquely Filipino. A way of turning suffering into compassion. A way of transforming loss into music." In that realization, something settled. He no longer wondered whether he belonged on global stages. He knew he did. Not despite where he came from, but because of it. And in that moment, the Philippines was no longer just his home. It was his gift to the world. Long after the lights dimmed and the hall emptied, the impact of that evening continued to ripple outward in ways no one could have planned. The singer eventually returned home, but he did not return as the same man who had left. Something fundamental had been affirmed. Not his talent, not his career, but his identity. He understood now that the Philippines had not simply shaped his voice, it had shaped his way of seeing the world. He began to notice how often people tried to frame the story as a rare moment, a lucky night, a coincidence of mood and melody. But he knew better. What happened was not accidental. It was the result of generations of lived experience distilled into sound. The reason the song reached strangers was because it carried truths that cross borders effortlessly. Love that waits, regret that humbles, faith that endures when logic fails. For him, the greatest realization came quietly. The Philippines had not helped him survive hardship. It had taught him how to remain human within it. That distinction mattered. Survival hardens many people. But Filipino culture, shaped by history, faith, and struggle, insists on tenderness even when circumstances are cruel. That is why the song did not demand understanding. It offered connection. As word of the performance spread, messages arrived from unexpected places. Teachers who played the song in classrooms, parents who sent it to children they had not spoken to in years, Filipinos abroad who said they felt seen for the first time in a long while. Foreign listeners who admitted they had underestimated the country and now felt humbled by that realization. A personal moment had quietly become a universal one. The singer never claimed that the Philippines was perfect. He spoke instead of something more meaningful, that in a world increasingly defined by noise, speed, and division, the Philippines still knows how to listen, still knows how to feel, still believes that compassion is not weakness and that faith is not outdated. These values do not make headlines, but they change lives. And that is the deeper message this story leaves behind. That power doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it arrives softly, through a song sung in a language you do not understand, by a voice you did not expect to trust. Sometimes the strongest nations are not the loudest ones, but the ones that quietly remind the world what it means to be human. For Filipinos, this story is not about external validation. It is about recognition, a reminder that what has always lived within the culture has value beyond its borders, that faith carried through hardship, kindness offered without condition, and resilience wrapped in humility are not small things. They are rare gifts. For everyone else, it is an invitation to listen more carefully, to question assumptions, to remain open to being moved by places the world too often overlooks, because that night proved something simple and profound. When the Philippines speaks from the heart, the world does not just hear it, it feels it.